What's up, guys? We're back with another podcast episode, and this week is going to be a little bit different. If you're watching the podcast, you'll notice that this probably looks a little bit different, and that's because today I woke up sick. So I told Isaac to just stay home. I'll record the podcast on my own so I don't get him sick. And yeah, and if also I sound a little bit odd, that's because I'm sick. So anyways, you're just going to be hearing me talk this week. We've got quite a few things to talk about. We've got a lot of different paddles. Going to talk about the Selkirk trip we just got back from, and then we also do have some Q&A in the kitchen. So stay tuned for that because I think there were some great questions inside of there. The first thing I want to go over is that for those of you who are fans of the Melin hats that I'm always wearing or we're always wearing, the discount code is back for the next 24 hours. By the time this podcast is live, the code should already be live. It probably will have been live for about an hour already, but you can use code PBST20 for 20% off a Melin hat for the next 24 hours. And they did recently just launch some new summer hats, and I picked up a few of those. So I am excited to check those out because I think some of the colors are nice. And for those of you who are 11.624 fans, I don't have it. It is one of the ones I ordered, but they have one that is like the same exact color as the Power Series Edgeguard color. So if you want to match your paddle to your hat, you could do that. But yeah, for those of you who were wondering about that discount code, it is finally back. And then I have two things I kind of want to pose questions to you guys. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'd love for you to leave a comment down below about these. So the first one is about Gen 2 and Gen 3 paddles. Probably more specifically Gen 3, but we can clump Gen 2 inside of here as well. So I feel like right now the paddle market's been in this interesting state for probably a year and a half. I mean, maybe even 2 years if you want to go all the way back to Gen 2 paddles. But I find as a reviewer, I'm very concerned about durability for people buying these, right? If you have a paddle that performs amazing, but it's broken in 2 weeks, a month, maybe even 2 months on the slower end for some people, in my mind, that is not a paddle that people would want to buy or use. But I still see plenty of those paddles everywhere. I mean, I think the greatest example last year was the Mod. They were everywhere, and it was very well established that those broke all the time. So one thing I want to know is how many Gen 2 or Gen 3 paddles have you broke? Like core crushed and you had to warranty it, or you broke something else. And two, does this annoy you or does it not annoy you? Because in my head, I find that this is a really annoying problem, but I see these paddles everywhere in the wild, and then I go, well, maybe people just don't care. Or the other thing that I'm considering is that the groups of people that I tend to play in are much heavier hitters and they're higher level players, so they're just naturally going to break paddles faster, right? If you take someone who's 5'5" and has a tennis background, they're going to break a paddle or core crush one significantly faster than your 3'5" at the park. Even if that 3'5" plays a ton throughout the week, they're probably just not putting the same amount of force into the ball, and they just might not have a core crushing issue or break-in or these other issues. So I'm curious where you guys fall on the spectrum. So how many have you broken, and does it annoy you? And if it does annoy you and you still use one, why do you still use one? Is it just because the performance is so good that you can't ignore? My guess is that's probably the answer for most people. I mean, even with Gen 2 and Gen 3's core crushing, it's hard to deny that the performance is there, right? If you look at a Pro 4 or many of the top performing paddles in the market, they're all built with a Gen 2 or Gen 3 style. The only like real top performing paddle right now that's a Gen 1 is the Paddle Tech, but that comes at the expense of a significantly smaller sweet spot. So it's all pros and cons, but I'm just curious where you guys sit with that. The next thing I wanted to talk about was, and I'll try and put it on screen if I can download the clip, but there's a clip floating around memes of Pickleball and all the other social channels of somebody hitting a nasty Nelson on match point at the US Open, just in an amateur match. They had a ref. I thought this was crazy because they hit him in the dome and they immediately started celebrating because they won. And reading through the comments, I found the person who hit the shot, and their justification for this was basically they were targeting my partner the entire tournament. So I just decided to go for a nasty Nelson on match point. At least that was my interpretation of the comment that I had seen. And I go back and forth on this, right? Because a nasty Nelson is obviously a fully legal shot. You can do that. It's just generally in poor taste because you intentionally tried to hit the person, right? In general, if you're just trying to bag someone over and over, that's usually considered poor taste. So on the one hand, I'm like, okay, that's legal. That's a fair shot. And in some contexts, it's probably even funny. We've obviously seen some pros do it, and usually in those contexts, it's pretty funny. But it just, even if my partner was being targeted, if we're just talking normal targeted, every ball got hit to them because they are the weaker player, I don't know if I would nasty Nelson someone for targeting my partner, because that's just a normal tournament thing. I mean, if I go to a tournament with Isaac, I know I'm going to be the one getting targeted, and I would not expect Isaac to try and nasty Nelson the person because I'm being targeted. Now, I will say there may be contexts where if I am the stronger partner and my partner is getting picked on, they're purposely bagging my partner. Maybe they're not being apologetic. Maybe they're yelling when they hit my partner. They're just being really aggressive and kind of a jerk on the court. I'm not saying I would hit an Aston Nelson. That's probably at the absolute bottom of my list of things to try. However, I could see that making me mad enough that maybe I would think about doing something like that. But even still, I don't know. I feel like later I would probably end up regretting that. So anyways, I'm just curious what your guys' take on this. Do you think it's fair play? Doesn't matter? Who cares? Are you like, yeah, that's kind of in poor taste. We probably shouldn't be doing that. I don't know. You let me know down in the comments. All right, next up, I want to talk about a trip we took to Selkirk HQ last week. So there was a handful of other reviewers that got to go on this. It was me, Isaac, Braden, Aaron, Brian from Building Pickleball, John Q, and I might be forgetting someone else, but my brain is very foggy at this point, so I'm sorry if I'm forgetting someone. But this was an interesting trip. So basically, we just kind of got to see the behind the scenes of Selkirk and see how their business is structured, how they're building paddles, and I thought it was interesting. So I've always known Selkirk, and I think everyone knows this, that Selkirk is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, brands in pickleball. So obviously their operation and their scale was going to be very large, but to see this in person was a lot more impressive than I thought. I mean, there were multiple buildings that they were operating out of. Their shipping department was absolutely gigantic. I mean, their shipping department alone is probably larger than most mid-sizes companies' entire operation, if I had to imagine. Like, it was huge. So that was really impressive. We got to see their R&D testing, and this is what I thought was really interesting. So we've gotten to see the curtain kind of pulled behind this a couple of times. You know, they'll make some social media posts and kind of show their tools. But seeing it in person, it was really impressive, the testing equipment they had. I mean, I have to imagine, I think Braden may have even said this, but if you took both governing bodies, both PPL and USAP, I have to imagine that they have more testing capability and tools to go in depth on testing than any of the other governing bodies. I mean, it was wildly impressive to see the things they were working on and have been building. And it sounds like it wasn't until the last couple months that all of that got finalized and they kind of had all the tools ready to go and be actively used all the time. I mean, Selkirk themselves already has 2 ball cannons, one for compliance testing and then one for durability testing. And I just thought that was pretty interesting because, to my knowledge, USAP only has 1 cannon right now, or maybe they have access to both, but they're only using one. So I just thought it was interesting that a pickleball brand of all had more testing capabilities than our governing body at the moment. Another interesting thing is we actually got to build our own paddle. So this was kind of fun. It was almost like a Build-A-Bear, but for paddles. So they gave us 2 core options. There was a high density foam and a low density foam. And then we had 4 different face options we could choose from. It was fiberglass, unidirectional carbon fiber, a twill carbon fiber, and then a fiberglass, if I didn't already say that. Again, being sick, my head's a little cloudy right now. But anyways, there was 4 facing layers, and then you could pick as many facing layers as you wanted to build that paddle. And it was very interesting because the weight of those face layers adds up incredibly quickly. So the low density foam obviously weighed less. So if you wanted to do more face layers, you could choose that. And then you had the high density foam, which was heavier, and you were going to be able to use less face layers with that. So it was very interesting kind of building this paddle. And then we got the paddles back the same day, got to play with them a little bit. Mine actually wasn't bad. I don't know if it was one that I would main, but it was not bad by any means. It was certainly playable, maybe just a little bit on the heavier side. I think mine was 8.7 ounces. Isaac was like 10 ounces or something. But the fun part is they also gave us a deflection number on all of ours. And I want to say 3 out of the 6 people, only 3 of them passed. I think it was me, Isaac, and Brian, I think. And then everyone else has technically failed a deflection test. So I thought that was just kind of funny. Not really relevant for anything, but it was just kind of amusing to be like, hey, my paddle passed and yours would fail a test. But yeah, I thought that was really cool. I think when we were weighing all the materials, it was kind of like, oh, I was going to do 4 layers on each side, but that's going to be an 11-ounce paddle. So I guess I'm going to have to peel back some layers. So I think getting to see some of that in person just gave me interesting perspective on certain decisions. I feel like when we talk about paddles, sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, why didn't they just add a fiberglass layer in here? Why didn't they just do this? And I think building it myself, it was kind of like, oh, well, there's a weight consideration here, which is obviously we knew there was a weight consideration. It was more just like, how much does that impact the paddle? So I thought that was kind of fun. We did also get to build an edgeless paddle, which is also very interesting because that's a lot more labor intensive than what I thought it was. Like you're placing a lot of carbon fiber pieces throughout this entire mold. And I mean, I don't know how long it took us to build that one edgeless paddle. We kind of had one person doing each step. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot more labor intensive, and I could see where things could easily go wrong building one of those. I mean, the amount of workers you would need to be building these thermoformed paddles at scale would be crazy. I don't know exactly how they're doing it in China, but it sounds like the process we were doing manually just seems to be the best way, or perhaps even the only way. So that was another interesting perspective of like, oh, wow, building this is actually a little bit harder than I thought. Now, that was an edgeless paddle. Maybe a Gen 2 thermoform paddle with an edge guard is a little bit easier, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that was also interesting perspective, just getting to build some paddles. Let me see what else we got here. So as far as their testing, I think one of the things that was interesting seeing everything there and all the tools they had is it makes a lot of the testing that we see overseas feel very basic. There's that one device we've seen it for years. I mean, since the inception of Gen 2 paddles, we've seen that little device that swings a paddle and whacks it kind of like against what looks like it's not a ball, but some hard material that is in a ball shape, and it smacks it at, some amount of speed over and over and over. We've seen that. I know they have a ball cannon now, and I'm sure they have other testing machines that I'm not aware of that I haven't gotten to see yet. But seeing what Selkirk has in the U.S. was extremely impressive from that standpoint, and made me feel pretty good about just as they're building paddles that they can confidently say, yeah, this breaks down this way, or this doesn't break down, or here's what happens when you do this. Just thought that was kind of interesting getting to see all of that. Now, what I will say is getting to see all of this was very cool and very impressive, but I still don't agree with the last few years of how they've done their paddles. I don't think that getting to see this changes any of that, right? I still think a lot of the edgeless paddles have been underperformers. I mean, the fact that the Power Air has existed for as long as it has, the Amped Pro, Vanguard Control was okay. And then, I mean, the SLK paddles have been, in my opinion, some of their best performing paddles. A lot of the other paddles are just overpriced for what you're getting. The Lux is okay, I think, as a control paddle. I think a lot of people do enjoy that paddle. I think that's one of their better edgeless ones. But yeah, I think it's interesting getting to see all of the testing capability, but then to see paddles that have been released the last few years and have been significant underperformers. Now, with that being said, I did get to see and try some prototypes that Selkirk has been making, and I'm not allowed to talk about them. But I think Selkirk might be about to be in their revenge era. They've got some paddles that are really nice. Now, will they change from what I hit to release? Maybe. Who knows what they're going to be priced at? That will obviously play a big deciding factor on how good a paddle is. But I think objectively, what they released were not only Selkirk's best paddles they've probably ever made, but I would put them in top tier of the current market. And, again, it's obviously depending on how long it takes them to release this will be another interesting deciding factor. If they wait 2 years to release it, the market may have changed a lot. But if some of them release this year, that could be a pretty big deal for Selkirk. And I think something that may turn the tide for them as a brand in the competitive market, because those were some really impressive paddles. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see where they go. And thanks to Selkirk for flying a bunch of us out there to check it out. I thought it was really cool. And hopefully we start seeing some better performing paddles here soon. All right. Next up, I want to talk about a bunch of gear. So first, we've got a bunch of upcoming paddles. So we have the Friday Fever. So this has been making some waves. Again, this is a paddle I've only gotten to hit a very small amount. But it is a Gen 3 constructed paddle, and if you know Friday, they have been known for making budget paddles, and the launch price is going to be $99, and then I think at a later date, it's going to go up to $129. From the limited hitting I have done with this, I would not expect this to be a power paddle Gen 3. At least maybe there's a huge break-in later, but when I was hitting it, definitely felt on the softer side. I think for $99, it'll be an exceptionally good performing paddle, but don't think that you're going to get a Pro 4 or a mod or a Paddle Tech level power from this, unless there's a big break-in. But if there's a big break-in, then, you know, that probably means something's breaking. But if people are used to spending $300 for a paddle that breaks, maybe they'll buy 3 of these and not really care that they break. So, yeah, we'll kind of see there. But let me see if I can pull up the stats. I did grab some stats on this. So twist weight of the Friday Fever, 5.84, and the swing weight for an elongated paddle is actually pretty low. It's 110. You don't see that too often. I'm very curious how they got the weight down on that. I'm curious if it was a facing layer thing or something else, since a lot of Gen 3 paddles, especially elongated, tend to be probably 117 to 120-ish. So yeah, if you're curious about that, I think this is probably another paddle in terms of a budget paddle that could be pretty high up there, but you know, it needs a lot more testing just to see if there are any quirks or things you should be aware of. But I believe this paddle is also releasing pretty soon here. Then next up, we already talked about these a little bit, and I believe we are allowed to show these now. The SLK Eras. So I have gotten to hit these a bit. I don't think I'm allowed to say too much about these yet, but similar to what I said before, I think this would be one of Selkirk's best paddles right now. If you're looking for a power paddle, I think definitively this is Selkirk's best paddle, and being in the SLK line, hopefully that makes it a little bit cheaper if the tariffs, you know, decide to calm down. Actually, there was news this morning, if you're listening to this on Monday, that for the next 90 days, it looks like things are going to cool off. So hopefully that's good news for the paddle market. But what's really exciting is Selkirk decided to use that new Maxima shape they were dabbling with, which is basically a Neonic Flow Prime X shape for their wide body, and I love that. The S2 and the Epic, I just felt like were very outdated shapes. This is much better. The performance of this paddle is great. I could easily take this to a tournament and have no problem. And if they're able to get the price down on this and not be egregious with it, I think, again, this is a paddle that could kind of put Selkirk back on the radar a little bit. And then they do have an elongated one, slightly rounded head. Handle feels to be about 5.5 inches. So again, nice, better shape. I think a lot of people would appreciate both of these shapes and is quite a bit better than what they've historically been using. So yeah, keep an eye out for these SLKs. I know a lot of people have been seeing the pros play with them, and I can confirm the performance of those paddles is definitely good. I think it's all just going to come down to how they get priced, because things are relative, right? If those are $500, as an extreme example, wouldn't be recommended for most people. So we'll see. All right, next up, I don't have all 3 shapes in front of me, but 11624 just had a new paddle get approved. This is the one I'm holding right now is the Vapor Alpha Pro Power 16 millimeter. So I've only gotten to hit these a very small amount. I'm going to reserve my judgment until I've gotten some more time on them. I don't know when these are releasing yet. I don't even have pricing on these yet, but I saw it hit the approved list, and then 3 of these showed up at my doorstep. I am curious about this. So they just had the Power Series release, and the fact that they're releasing another Power Series is really interesting, and I feel like they're going to conflict a little bit. So that's where I'm curious to see how they price this paddle. My hunch from the limited playtesting I've done is that the main difference you're going to feel is just the feel of the paddle, how stiff it is, how much dwell time, how soft it feels, things like that. I think it's going to be less about one is significantly more powerful than another and more, I like how this one feels more, but I get a similar amount of power, maybe slightly more with one over the other. I think that's where most of the difference is going to come down to. So I don't know. I just think it's kind of interesting to release another power model right after what seemed to be an already very successful power model. But maybe as I hit this more, there will be things that feel quite a bit better about it. From the early testing, it's definitely a good paddle. We'll just have to compare it to the other power series and see how it holds up. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. My guess is sometime around summer for this one. All right, that seems to be it for the paddles I can talk about. I will say there's a lot of paddles I'm not allowed to talk about right now, but I think this summer is going to be a pretty exciting time for paddles. I've gotten hit quite a few really nice prototypes, and there's some stuff coming that I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy. So keep an eye out this summer. All right, next up, I want to talk about the Joola Pro IV Scorpeus. I've had a ton of questions about this. I actually put out a thing on Instagram that was like, hey, let us know what questions you have for the pod. And the Pro IV Scorpeus came up over and over and over. Actually, it was kind of just the Pro IV as a whole, but the Scorpeus did come up a lot. So I've been playing the Pro IV Scorpeuses, both the 16 and the 14. I think I do still prefer the 14 for all the same reasons that I mentioned in my original review, which is basically it feels more predictable to me. I kind of know what it's going to do. And with weight, the less springy feel just feels better to me, or like I can control it nicer. I did add quite a bit of weight. I did 0.5 gram all the way from the bottom throat, almost up to the top corner, like right below where the top corner starts. I did 0.5 gram just because I thought it could use the extra stability. And I mean, there's not that much to say. I think what's interesting is a lot of paddles these days, if they're in the same family of paddles and they're just a different shape, most of the time, the performance between those shapes is not exceptionally different. There are specific instances, for example, the carbon true foams, where I personally believe the 2 unlocks a lot better than the 1 and the 3. There's just something about the void structure and how it's designed in a square that I think just works better for that paddle. So I do think there are cases where that happens. But in terms of the Pro 4s, I think you're getting exactly what you'd expect, right? The Scorpeus, you're going to get faster hand speed, you're going to get higher stability, and you're probably going to sacrifice a little bit of the top-end power when compared to some of the longer shapes. But if you prefer wide bodies and you liked the Pro 4, the Scorpeus is a great paddle. I mean, the Pro 4s as a whole, I would say, are pretty much definitively the #1 power paddle right now. I do think there are some concerns still about durability. It's been a lot better than last year's Gen 3s, but I definitely still hear reports about them breaking. So do be cautious about that if durability is something that's really important to you. But yeah, I mean, there's not that much to say. They're just good paddles. Like, I could go and play with one. I just think the top end pop and power is a little bit more than what I prefer for myself. A lot of people keep saying, why are you using a carbon when you could use the Scorpeus? And it mostly comes down to that. I really like how the carbon feels, and I feel like for my play style, which tends to be a little bit more all-court, maybe these days all-court leaning power, I just don't know that the extra power really helps me. I've got a lot of other things in my game that need fixing besides power, so I just feel that I can play more confidently with the carbon than I can the Scorpeus. But objectively, they're both great paddles, and if you're looking for a more power-based paddle, then the Scorpeus is what you would choose over the carbon, for sure. So that's my thoughts on the Scorpeus. All right, now if you saw the title, this is probably the meat and potatoes that you were really excited about, but the Ronbus Ripple is back. So I've got all 3 shapes here. This is the Ripple V2. This just got announced and sent to all the reviewers just the other day. And before we dive in, I'm going to read a statement about the paddle that Ronbus put out with USAP. So USAP said, USA Pickleball, as the governing body for the sport, remains steadfast in its commitment to ensuring the integrity of equipment testing and providing transparent communication. In late 2024, Ronbus submitted a beta version of the Ripple R1.14 PB Core 43 paddle for prototype testing. While the sample met initial tests, I almost said it wrong. I can't remember. I'm going to say this wrong. Someone pointed out that I said subsequent or subsequent. I'm so sick right now. I said it wrong on one podcast, and now I can't even remember what the proper way to say it is. So subsequent, that's what it is. But someone made fun of me for mispronouncing that last time. Anyways, subsequent production samples did not pass PB Core testing for certification. Ronbus has worked closely with USA Pickleball to ensure that its Ripple V2 paddles, set to launch this month, met all requirements to be fully USA Pickleball and PB Core approved. USA Pickleball appreciates the collaboration with Ronbus, as we are committed to working with all manufacturers to ensure fair and transparent testing. To prevent any confusion in the market, all previous Ripples will be voluntarily removed from the USA Pickleball approved paddle database effective July 1st, 2025. So before I read the rest of the statement, if you own any form of a beta Ripple, there was already kind of controversy over which ones were legal, which ones weren't legal. None of the Ripples prior to today will be legal anymore come July 1st. So if you own one of those, you cannot use those in any tournaments. Now, Ronbus is doing a refresh program where if you have one, you can get the new one for a discount. I don't know the discount off the top of my head. And I believe that only is allowed if you are a Connect member. So if you bought that Ripple secondhand from someone else, I don't believe you can apply for that refresh program. So do keep that in mind. All right. This is a statement from Ronbus in that same post. After significant work in our factory lab to replicate and calibrate the PB Core test, our Ripple V2 paddle has received full USAP PB Core 43 approval for its three shapes, the R1, R2, and the new R4. We truly appreciate USAP's assistance and support throughout this process, which has been invaluable in ensuring our paddles consistently meet legal limits. Furthermore, we've gone beyond the current requirements by conducting accelerated break-in, or ABI testing, confirming that our paddles remain within legal standards even after rigorous testing. We also want to express our gratitude to all our X-Pro and Ronbus Connect members who participated in our extensive Ripple beta testing. We are pleased to offer a Ripple refresh program to our participating members who purchased and still own the beta Ripple. This program will provide an opportunity to upgrade to the latest Ripple V2 at a special reduced price. More details on this program will follow shortly. So yeah, the Ripple is back. It's approved. They worked closely with USAP this time, so hopefully that means there shouldn't be any funny business or worry about this getting delisted. At least I would hope, given that they made a joint statement together. So yeah, the Ripple is going to be $280 when it launches, which is definitely on the pricey end, especially for Ronbus, but that's probably understandable given the probably pretty big business losses they took on the beta Ripples and then, all the delisting and that. But let's talk about the paddles. So we've got the R1, which all of you are familiar with. This is an elongated with a curved top. Then we've got the R2, which is the wide body paddle. And then we have the new R4, which is a hybrid. And actually, let me hold this up. Actually looks... So this is not the same as a Vapor shape from 11.624. The way the neck tapers actually gives you a decent bit more handle to hold on to. They're close, but you would definitely be able to get a little bit more on the R4 if you're worried about a two-handed backhand. But it looks very similar to that, just with a slightly longer handle is the biggest difference. So I did get to play with these, and it's going to be interesting. So I think if you were really excited about the old beta, I think you're probably still going to like these paddles, but there are some drawbacks now that you should be aware of when compared to the older ones. I think before, the older ones were so ridiculous and so good that for a lot of people, it would have been a no-brainer. It would have been like buying a mod. If that last one had been legal, everyone would have had it. The spin was crazy. The power was insane. It would have been the new, if you're playing pickleball, you need this paddle to win. And I don't think we're going to see that with this paddle. I still think it's extremely good, but I think it's toned down in probably all the right ways and in some ways that are probably going to upset some people. So let me pull up the stats here. So if we do the Ripple R1, the balance point is 250, which is very high. There's not a lot of paddles that cross that. The twist weight is 5.66. That's about standard. The last Ripples all had low twist weights. And then the swing weight on the R1, at least my unit, was 126. So that's a significant increase over the old one. I would have to check my database. Actually, let me pull it up here and see if it's in here, but I want to say the old one was right around like 111 for the elongated. Oh, bummer. I don't think I have it. Oh, wait, hang on. No, wrong paddle database. All right, let's go here. Ripple. The R1, yeah, was 114, so not quite as low as I thought, but going up 12 points, that is a significant jump. 126 is going to be harder for a lot of people to swing. So if you have a sensitive elbow or you don't like high swing weights, keep that in mind. The swing weight is a lot higher and definitely something you should keep in mind. And then for the R2, similar story. Balance point is higher for a wide body. We're at 242. The twist weight is 6.53, which is pretty reasonable for a wide body. Still lower than expect, but fine. And then the swing weight is 118. So again, for a wide body, that's pretty high. I would say a lot of wide bodies these days, you'll see be around maybe 104 all the way up to 114 usually on the high end. So 118, pretty heavy. And then the R4, bounce point of 244, twist weight of 5.73, which is low for a hybrid, and then a 117 swing weight. The 117 swing weight on that, yeah, it's higher, but I wouldn't say it's high in the way that the other ones are high. So I have a feeling that the R4, at least in terms of swing weight, might be the more popular model because it's not that out of the norm for the swing weight that the Shape is. But yeah, just keep that in mind. The swing weights are definitely higher. And I think a big thing after playtesting them is they're just not as lethal as the last ones, which is good. I'm not going to complain about that because I think the other ones would have been a problem for the game. But I think if you're really looking forward to what that last one was, you might be a little bit disappointed. So spin, let's start with that. I haven't ran RPM numbers on these yet, but spin definitely feels toned down drastically. I would put it right in line with every other good spinning paddle. I would put it up there with a Pro 4. I'd probably put it up there with a Paddle Tech. Like, it's just normal good. It's not elite good anymore. With the last Ripple, if I went to a Western grip, I could hit shots that I didn't even know were possible in pickleball. Now, when I try and do similar things, I just can't do it. I'm not getting the same amount of shape on the ball. It's fine amount of shape, but it's just not crazy. So keep that in mind. Spin is probably about what you're going to expect for most rock carbon fiber paddles these days. And then same thing for the power. Power, I would put it probably right in line with a Pro 4, maybe slightly below. And keep in mind that we're talking about these paddles in stock form. There's no weight, there's no break-in yet because these are the first few sessions. So yeah, power, I played it alongside the new Holbrook, which we'll talk about in a minute. I've played it alongside the Pro 4, and it's fine. I mean, it's going to be at the top of legal power, so if you like that and liked how the last Ripple felt, you will enjoy it. It's just not going to be ridiculous. Personally, I find that makes resetting just a little bit easier than it was previously, which I think for a lot of people is going to be good. But yeah, you're not going to get body bag your opponent anytime you want power with this paddle. Powerful, but just not over the top. What else do we got in here? Sweet spot, I personally felt like it was a little bit smaller, which is interesting with the higher swing weight and more material up there. I would have thought it would feel better. One of the things I know they did is they reinforced the carbon fiber in the center of the paddle and potentially out a little bit so that it has more structural rigidity and doesn't break down like the last one did, which I think is good. But one of the trade-offs that I think that made was it made the paddle more tingy. I don't know quite how to explain it without you hitting it, but it's almost like it doesn't feel like a metal bone. But there's a tingy feel that the metal bone has that it kind of reminds me of this. So I do think it feels a little bit different than the last Ripple, but largely retains the same identity, just with a few slight feel changes is probably what I would say. But yeah, I just kind of feel like downgrade from the last one, but that's probably what you should have expected if this paddle was ever going to be legal. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are still really excited about this paddle, but I don't think it's going to have the same level of excitement that the betas were having. I think with the higher swing weights, that's going to be a drawback for people. And then for some people who just really loved how you could shape the ball before, you're not going to have that now. That'll probably make it less exciting. But objectively, still a good paddle. I'm sure it's going to sell like hotcakes. More testing may even reveal that there's different setups that enhance the paddle in ways that I haven't experienced yet. I've only got 2 different play sessions on these paddles so far, but those are my initial thoughts right now. So people don't need to be worried about getting hit by one of these all the time. I wouldn't really panic about this paddle in terms of, oh, it should be illegal. All right, let's talk about a paddle that I actually am really excited about, and it's probably a paddle that I never would have expected to be excited about, and that is the Holbrook Arma. So we already talked about this a little bit when we were at the US Open. We got to hit these paddles a little bit. It was kind of hard to get a feel for the paddle. I could tell it was good, but we were playing with Franklin's, and it was like 90 degrees. Now that I'm back home and I've gotten to hit the Arma more, this is a very good paddle. I think there are going to be a lot of people who love this paddle. It's going to come in 3 shapes and 2 different facing layers. So you can get a carbon fiber version in the T model, which is what I'm holding, which is an elongated with a 5.5-inch handle. Then you'll have the X, which is a Magnus or Invictus shape, which is an elongated with a shorter handle. And then you'll also have the S, which is a wide body with a shorter handle. I don't think I ever thought I was going to, well, maybe not never, but in recent times, I have not been particularly a huge fan of elongated paddles. I usually gravitate towards hybrid or wide body. But in my opinion, the T, which is their elongated long handle, I love this one. I think this is a great paddle. Even as an elongated, I really didn't find I had any issues using it. The sweet spot for an elongated feels very large to me. I feel like a lot of times I really struggle with elongated paddles and their sweet spot size, but on the Arma, I really didn't have that, which is great. And then swing weight, let me pull up some of the stats here. Let's see, Arma T. So we've got a twist weight of 6.3, which for a elongated paddle is actually pretty good. Swing weight of 118. And then if we go down to the wide body one, twist weight of 6.91, swing weight of 110, so pretty fast in the hand. And then I actually don't have the carbon fiber version in the X shape, which is the Magnus style shape, so I can't give you the stats there. But then they also make these same paddles with a PET face, or titanium, as a lot of people call it. So if you like that feel, you can buy that. All right, this paddle, and also the price range is going to be $260 for the carbon fiber and $280 for the metallic ones. But the carbon fiber one, I think, is what's going to steal the show. I think if you want your paddle to be a little more subdued, a little less pop or power, that's where the metallic one would be nice. But the carbon fiber one, I really gravitated towards. It's just a lot of fun. I don't know how to explain it. Like, just hitting this paddle, I just like how it feels. It feels very solid on contact. The pop and power are there. Again, I would put it up in the highest realm of power, maybe again right below the Pro 4. I think the biggest difference I noticed with the Arma and the Pro 4s is that the pop is not as aggressive as the Pro 4s, but the driving power is there. And then the pop being toned down is probably why I like this paddle a little bit more. I think high pop paddles tend to be what gets me in trouble personally, just with resets or dinks. And so I think this having less pop is probably what's making it easier to use. But yeah, exceptionally good paddle. The biggest question mark I have is durability. If you heard our last podcast, this is using a new technology where basically they have 2 types of cores in this paddle. So if you've heard people talk about 10 millimeter cells and 8 millimeter cells, basically this bottom portion of the paddle here, if you're watching, is 10 millimeter or probably closer to 11 millimeter cells. And then the top portion, which is kind of like an upside down U, is 8 millimeter cells, I believe, or at least it's a much denser cell size up top than it is on the one on the bottom. So basically they're cutting out 2 cores and kind of fusing them together inside of the paddle. And then there's a big Gen 3 style ring. I haven't cut one of these open. I'm presuming an EVA foam ring that pretty much goes around the entire perimeter. And there's a lot of foam in there. From seeing some pictures, it seems to be considerably more than what a lot of the Gen 3s are on the market. The core actually looks like kind of a small amount of the paddle. So I'm very worried about the durability. Seeing the X-ray of the core didn't inspire a ton of confidence for durability for me. The cells just really don't look that healthy, and I feel like that's historically not been a great sign. So that's what I'm most worried about. If that holds up, or it holds up as good as a Pro 4, or as good as the other power paddles that I guess people have been able to tolerate, then I think people are going to love this. But if the durability shows to be really bad, I think that's going to be a big shame, because this paddle has a lot of potential. And I mean, I feel like me talking about an elongated paddle should tell you a lot. Because even the wide body, I need to hit that one more, but I actually didn't like that one as much. Probably just the shape of it with a slightly shorter handle, but felt like the power wasn't as piercing as it was on this elongated. And I'm just wondering with that dual density core, if maybe it just works a little bit better in an elongated shape. But yeah, either way, I believe this is coming out sometime early summer. Again, a lot of potential. I think a lot of people are going to like this. Yeah, just a solid paddle from the first sessions I've hit here. Really digging it. All right, last set of paddles I want to talk about. These are just interesting. So Volair released their new V.1F series. I believe these are dual fiberglass at the bottom and then a layer of PET or titanium on top. And then they're kind of purple if you're watching the podcast here. I actually haven't gotten to play these yet. I would like to go and play these, but I just haven't. Just a lot of paddles to get through, so I haven't got through these yet. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is I just don't understand the shapes that Volair was going for. So they released two shapes that are pretty standard. They released their regular Mach 2 shape, which I have a friend borrowing that one right now. And then they also did a hybrid shape, or pretty close to hybrid. I think it's actually a little skinnier than some of the hybrids, but most people would be fine with this. So the hybrid and the wide body, most people are going to be fine with that. They're going to like those paddles, I think, in terms of shape. But then they released two really weird shapes. If you're watching right now, you're looking at the most pizza peel paddle I've ever seen. In fact, I'm pretty convinced that some of the frozen pizzas that I buy, I could take out on this paddle if I wanted to. Like, I literally think it would fit perfectly on this paddle. It's got a long handle to like keep your hand away from the oven. It's kind of crazy. So I don't know who was asking for this shape. I don't know who would play with this shape. Like, I did mess with this one a little bit, and it wasn't as bad as I thought, but I don't think there's a world where I would play with this. I mean, the handle is just so long, takes away so much face. I just don't really see a world where that is the, I guess, paddle makeup that someone's looking for. I think, again, in terms of something that's fun, yeah, sure, but yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of weird looking. And then you have this extra elongated one, which is like a probably 6-inch handle, and then it's 17 inches in length. So it's very skinny, similar to something like Pickleball Apes Pulse E, if you're familiar with that. Maybe this one's a little bit more okay, but again, still very niche. So I just find it odd that right after signing Dylan, they do probably two of the most polarizing shapes I have ever seen in pickleball. If you guys are watching, let me know what you think of these. I don't know what to make of them. Also, very interesting. The handles are the squishiest handles I have ever felt. Like, if you felt a foam handle, you know, they can be a little squishy. These are like, they feel like memory foam. Like, I can like really compress this. Like, if I go for a counter and squeeze, like I can feel the whole handle like compress in my hand, which I just think is kind of odd. So yeah, not a ton to say about these, but I just thought the shapes were a little awkward and probably not mass appeal. So anyways, those are all the paddles. Hope that helps give you guys some insight into what's coming up and kind of what you can expect before the full reviews come out. But now that you've made it to the kitchen, do have some questions I want to talk about. So one person actually got multiple questions about this. First, they wanted me to update you on the Pro 4 durability, which we kind of talked about a little bit, but we can touch on it again. And then they also asked, how's the 11.624 Power Series durability been? And I would say overall good. I would say the 11.624 is better than most Gen 3s, given the length of time that they've been out. I still really haven't heard that many issues. However, in my area with the higher level people, I am starting to see them break. So we have one guy who broke his first one maybe in less than 20 hours, and then he got a replacement, and I believe he just told us that one is starting to crunch as well. And then one of my friends who, the second I gave him a Pegasus, he gave up his paddle tech, switched to it. He's been using that for 2-3 months, and he just told me his core crushed, and he's going to warranty his. So that's longer than most Gen 3 paddles that I see, but you know, we say this all the time, and I kind of feel like a broken record, and I'm sure some of you who listen to every episode are sick of hearing it. But with any Gen 3 construction, and same with Gen 2, you just can't expect the durability to last forever. I think no matter what these companies say, everyone always says, oh, we cracked thermoforming, we've figured out Gen 3, ours doesn't break in. Rarely is that true. I will say the biggest pro I've seen of the Power Series from 11.624 is the change in feel really doesn't happen until the paddle breaks. And then, yeah, it's going to get hotter. But there's not really this weird break-in where it kind of keeps changing all over the place. The paddle seems to play pretty stable overall and then just eventually breaks. And, seems to be happening in smaller waves. And same thing with the Pro 4. I think there is a little bit more of a break-in period with that where it changes. And then the durability has been better than last year's, but probably worse than the 11.624s. But it's also hard to compare, right? You're comparing someone who's selling tens of thousands of paddles to 11.624 who's not shipping as many units. So just by volume, you're going to hear about more issues because more people have the paddles. So yes, they both can still break. I would say they're both doing better than they have historically, but if breaking is something that you're just fed up with, then you're going to want to look into some of these foam core options or a paddle tech and potentially just avoid all of that. So yeah, better than historic, but not perfect by any means. Also, I think a thing that's important to understand is that how fast one of these will break is very relative, right? So sometimes I'll see people in the comments or online saying, well, I know a pro at my local facility and he breaks a Joola every 2 weeks. A pro breaking a paddle every 2 weeks is not like a perfect comparison to what an amateur is going to experience, right? If you take a 3.5 from your local park who just likes to play casually, they like to play for fun, they may get 6 months, maybe even a year out of that paddle because they probably just don't hit that hard. The paddle's not going through nearly as much abuse and their ball isn't hitting the same spot every time, right? They're hitting more areas of their face, where a pro, they're beating just one central spot on that paddle over and over and over with way more force. So comparing a person who's 5'5" to a 3.5 isn't a perfect example, right? So I think people need to understand that depending on your level, you may not have to worry about paddles breaking as much as someone who plays 5.0 plus or plays qualifiers. Those guys are going to cook through paddles no matter what. And yeah, I mean, they're just drilling and training very hard. So I think that is something people need to consider, is that skill level definitely makes a difference in how long a paddle is going to last. Okay, next up, are there any paddles releasing that tempt you to switch from the carbon? Yes, unfortunately, none of them I can talk about. But I mean, even a lot of the paddles that we just talked about, the Holbrook, in terms of paddles that are out right now, I would almost consider the Holbrook. I still don't know that elongated is probably the shape I would want to use all the time, but I do really like how that plays. I would need more time to compare the carbon to it and see how I feel in tense situations. But the Holbrook was tempting. And then there's some prototypes I hit that I would probably consider switching very quickly if that was out right now. So we'll see when or if those come out. It's prototypes, so you never know. But yeah, there's definitely paddles out there that are tempting for sure. All right, next. Thoughts on how face layups impact a paddle. And I think this is a great question because I think face layups are a very big contributing factor to how a paddle is going to play. So back in the day, early on, it was kind of like carbon fiber paddles. They play like this. They're going to be a little more softer, a little more plush. Then it was like fiberglass only paddles. They're going to be stiffer, more harsh, smaller sweet spot. Then you introduce like Kevlar, and it was like, okay, these are a little bit stiffer than carbon fiber. And then we start talking about PET or titanium, and it was, these are a little bit softer. But what's tricky about that, right, is it depends on so many variables. It depends on how you lay up the facing materials. What if you do carbon fiber at 0, 90, 0, or you do them all at 45 degrees? That's going to produce a different result just within the same material. How many facing layers did you use? And then even if you say a paddle has fiberglass, is it on the bottom? Is it on the top? Is it in the middle? So I think these days it's actually a lot harder to tell you how a face layer is going to perform because there's so many different combinations of facing materials that companies are using that I don't think it's as black and white anymore to say, oh, well, this is just a little bit of a softer material. Now it's kind of like, how do these play in conjunction with each other? And then the cell sizes of the core may impact things as well. So all of that to say, I think it makes a very big difference. Personally, one of my more favored layups, and it all depends on the carbon fiber and the angles and everything they lay it up in, but carbon fiber, fiberglass, carbon fiber is very good. I've also seen some versions where fiberglass is at the bottom and then 2 carbon fiber layers. That's also pretty good. I think Franklin did a great job doing all of their layers at 45 degrees. I think that produced a feel that was different. And I've also hit some paddles recently that I thought had fiberglass in them, and then I found out they actually didn't have fiberglass in them. But the way they laid up the carbon fiber made it feel more like it had fiberglass in it, and I'm sure that had something to do with the core too. So yeah, facing layers are really important, and I think it's good to be aware of it, and I wish more companies would kind of advertise how they are laying things up, but I think it just gets so deep in the weeds, right? Your shape could impact things. Your core type could impact things, whether it's polymer or foam, small cell size, large cell size, how many facing layers, what order are they in, like all these different things like make the sum of a paddle. So it's not as easy to isolate some of these things. Sometimes you just have to look at the whole paddle and go, yeah, on paper that sounds like it wouldn't work, but you know what? It actually does work really well. So yeah, those are my thoughts on face layups and how they impact a paddle. Last question. I thought this was really good. If I have a short wingspan, is it still worth it to go from an elongated to a wide body? This is just going to depend entirely on the player. Shapes are so preference-based and what you're used to, what sport do you come from, what are you comfortable with. But when I see this question, the prime example that I'm going to use is Annalie Waters. She's not that tall. Let's even pull it up on Google. How tall is Annalie Waters? She is 5'6". If she can play with a paddle that historically wasn't even maxing out the length of a paddle, it was like, what was it, 15.7, 15.8 for her paddle tech, and she's 5'6", and she can be the #1 pickleball player in the world on the women's side, yeah, I'd say most people can probably make it work unless you're just really short. But again, it all comes down to what you like, right? As many of you know, Isaac loves elongated paddles. He's probably never going to use a wide body. For myself, I tend to prefer wide body and hybrid. I can use an elongated, but it's not my favorite. So I think that's largely what it comes down to, and some paddles maybe play a little bit better in a wide body, and that might make you consider it more. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the wingspan issue, because there are pros that are short, and they're making it work really well. So I do think that's a good question, though. But yeah, keep considering wide bodies, because I think they're still pretty underrated in the paddle market. Everyone's still kind of on the elongated craze, but you know, if it works for you, it works for you. So anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully you were able to tolerate listening to me ramble to myself for probably over an hour. But yeah, we will catch you guys next week, and hopefully I'm not sick anymore. See you later.